Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Carasoft Technology would like to welcome you to our ServiceNow Public Sector Tech Talk, Modernizing Legacy Fed IT for today's efficiency and fiscal requirements. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. Please note that all lines have been muted to reduce any kind of background noise during the presentation. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to answer by the end of the presentation or follow up with you offline. This webinar is being recorded, and a copy will be emailed to you. Just to tell you a little bit about Carasoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider supporting public sector organizations across federal, state, and local government agencies, including education and healthcare markets. At this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to our speakers. Gus, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gus Pastori. I've been with ServiceNow for about 5.5 years. And I've held a bunch of different jobs across the platform, but I'm currently focusing on helping customers leverage the full breadth of ServiceNow to mitigate and to augment gaps of traditional systems. And a lot of our conversations are actually happening in the finance space. So in a second, I'm going to introduce you, or I'm going to ask my colleague Jonathan to introduce himself, and then we'll go through the agenda. But as was said earlier, please feel free to put any questions or comments you have in the chat, which we will monitor throughout the course of the conversation. And then there will be time towards the end when we get to closing remarks and kind of summarizing the conversation, where we'll open the floor for any extended dialogue you wish to have. Jonathan, if you would come off mute and just introduce yourself real quick.
Thanks, Gus. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Albaum, and I'm the federal CTO for ServiceNow. Before ServiceNow, I worked in the federal government for many years. I was a chief information officer at different agencies. I worked extensively at the Department of Agriculture, first as the deputy and then the CIO at the Food and Nutrition Service, and worked on different programs at USDA and Food and Nutrition. And eventually, I became the CIO for the department. And through those different experiences in government, I got a real firsthand view of what it takes to modernize systems. I worked on systems earlier in my career, as a consultant and built systems. But when you have to operate them and you really can see the impact of legacy technologies on the way people get their job done, there's a real incentive to modernize and create better experiences. And that's been really what I focused on during the close to 6 years that I've been at ServiceNow, supporting these kinds of efforts on the platform. And I've had a chance to work with Gus on a variety of topics like this and modernization on ERP and others. So I think we're going to have a great conversation today and hopefully share some perspective and some experiences that can help you on your modernization journey. So Gus, thanks for inviting me to be on the webinar with you. And why don't you go ahead and get started?
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, so real quick, let's hit our agenda. So we're going to cover a couple of topics today. The first thing we're going to do is to really identify the key problem areas with today's systems architecture and identify what is holding back organizations from being successful. And then we'll start to align ServiceNow's value and the platform to the opportunity in the marketplace for modernization, efficiency gain, and the ability to really simplify and streamline the Office of Finance. In doing so, we'll introduce a new architectural approach that we think is really taking root and a number of our customers are really starting to identify with. And then we'll talk about how that new architectural approach feeds AI and the ability to consume AI across the platform, and how we kind of arrive at the next paradigm of technology. And then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts and closing. Before we move into this, I want to say a couple of things really and really make clear. What ServiceNow is doing is really what we've been doing for the last 20 or so years. You've heard from us specifically over the last 4 or 5 years about the platform of platforms approach. And if I could summarize it, it's the ability for ServiceNow to be the abstraction for engagement and workflow without the dependence of data. Data is super important, but where data lives and why, you should be able to make those choices without having to shoehorn yourselves into verticalized and really duplicative technological scenarios that we've lived through over the last couple decades. So what we're introducing is really a new way of thinking about ServiceNow, applying it to a different problem. But at the end of the day, things are very much the same with the company. There's not a whole lot. I mean, there's a ton that's new, but the basic blocking and tackling of it all hasn't changed very much. So let's talk about finance real quick. Typically, organizations that partner with ServiceNow, they think about ServiceNow as a ticketing system. And over the course of time, they've grown with ServiceNow, but the general conception is not necessarily applied to the domain of finance. So let me talk for a second about why we're relevant in finance. And in order to do so, let's kind of talk about the problem. So typically, there is a difference between the organizations and the departments in those organizations we've typically supported. And like I've said, finance hasn't been a key part of our approach there. But the root problem is very much the same. Organizations are struggling with moving work across multiple disparate teams and multiple disparate departments. The functions of finance, they're incredibly complex because they have to be. But that incredible complexity puts vendors and software and hardware at the center of the enterprise architecture universe, and it leaves the end user on the outside looking in. And when the end user is on the outside of that equation, the end user doesn't have the ability to provide inputs simply. Those inputs don't enrich and engage that data very simply. Users create other ways of working, which we'll talk about in a second. And that provides a ton of opportunity for what we refer to as human middleware. And the opportunity for human middleware are things that are time latent, they're difficult to accomplish, they're almost impossible to track. And in between the gaps is where doubt seeps in. And doubt creates more work. And when you're trying to close the books or you're trying to report on your budget or allocate money, you need to know where things are, when, and why. And the complexity of systems have really just overcomplicated this world. So as we kind of move on, I made a comment a few minutes ago about putting the end user in the center of the enterprise architecture universe. Today, that's not really the case. And what that's manifested and created are gaps in knowledge and gaps in processes, siloed data, manual effort, and all of this comes together with the added bonus of it's very difficult to navigate the enterprise and just get things done. The consequence on finance is that the teams in finance, as well as the employees needing things and needing assistance from that department, they face significant challenges. Those challenges could be lifted greatly through streamlining operations. Today, people talk about streamlining integrations through modernizing their ERP. They want to move away from a perpetual on-prem license base or instance and migrate it to the cloud. And in doing so, they're also forcing a function of having to change the customizations and configurations that have been built within an organization over time. ServiceNow, we're going to show you how we align ourselves to the architectural North Star of a clean or a lean core. But in general, and I said this earlier, and I'll say this again, in order for the outputs to be consistent, reliable, and dependable, we need to create a better ecosystem for employees to provide inputs. If the inputs are better, the outputs are better, we'll be able to streamline processes, bring more value and more confidence in our reporting, and be able to close the books, be able to balance the budget, be able to direct funding specifically in the ways that are in the best interest of the organizations that we support. So let's talk about ServiceNow for a second. What is ServiceNow's relevance in this world? How does ServiceNow solve the problems that we've laid out? ServiceNow is a single task-based architecture. Single task-based architecture that is role-based from the ground up. A single task-based architecture that's role-based from the ground up, that has a single data model and a single way of delivering service across the enterprise. And all of that is stitched together with a standardized set of developer tools. What that means is that if I know who someone is, what their job is, what building they're in or where they work from, and who their boss is, and I understand that taxonomy, then I can deliver the right experiences and the right services to the right people in the right place at the right time. And if I can do that, I can deliver an omni-channel experience that someone sitting at one desk has, and it looks pretty similar, if not the exact same, to someone sitting at another desk. The difference being is those people, based on those roles, may have completely different views of the things that they're allowed to see and the things that they're allowed to do. This makes it so that an employee in HR or an employee in IT or an employee in procurement or legal or finance, it means that they have a view of the world that is specific to them without exposing them to other things that exist within ServiceNow. And if these people are requesting a password reset, a network access, help around a laptop, or if they're adding their son or daughter to their benefits or doing work in the mission in ServiceNow, then it stands to reason that I can send them a request to verify master data relative to suppliers and vendors. Or I can send them a request to kick off some type of purchase authorization. And I can do all of that, and leveraging the power of rich integration, I can maintain a standard for data that exists within a system of record. So let me stop for a second and just ask Jonathan, do you have any comments or anything that you'd like to come over the top and iron out for me that I haven't covered so far?
Well, you're doing a great job, Gus, but I do want to point out to everybody that, this diagram demonstrates the complexity of the way organizations operate. And what you're talking about is ServiceNow as a tool for the enterprise. When it touches all these different areas of the organization, you could even, I think, throw in program offices, right, that have these kinds of requirements that are using ServiceNow to streamline the workflows that they have to deliver on their program requirements. You can think about ServiceNow as the underlying technology that connects everybody across the organization, irrespective, to your point, of what they're doing. But more importantly, it doesn't matter where they sit, it doesn't matter what their job function is. There's one place to go to transact business. It may be administrative business, it may be front office business tied to supporting a constituent or running a program or getting a payment out to somebody or managing fraud cases or something like that. So we really encourage an enterprise view. A lot of people think about ServiceNow as something that the CIO uses for IT operations or IT service management. And, of course, that's where ServiceNow started and how we've made our name. But, at our core, we're a platform for connecting things, just like Gus is showing. We connect people, we connect data, we connect systems, we connect processes, we can connect across organizations, just like we're showing here. And when we can apply that model of connecting things and making it easier for the work to flow, you apply what we've done in IT to customer service. You apply it in HR, you apply it in procurement, you apply it in a program office. And, suddenly ServiceNow seems like, hey, we do everything all over. But really, again, we're doing the one thing of connecting people and connecting organizations and connecting systems. Again, just like we're seeing here to make those work experiences seamless and simple. So I'd encourage everybody who's listening, as you think about modernization, whether it's in financial systems like we're talking about right now, or other kinds of technologies or other kinds of business systems inside your organization, to really be thinking about ServiceNow as the underlying tool to make the work flow irrespective of the office, and using the core capabilities of the platform to drive change and transformation.
Absolutely. And you made a good point here on data. Look, data is the most important thing that organizations have at their disposal. Data has gravity, and it should live where it's best served. But in order for that data to be ever more valuable, it cannot exist in a static state. It has to be engaged with and enriched through work. If work is hard to get to, if work is hard to find, or if it's difficult to engage with, and you don't like the system you're working with, you will find other ways of working. And that kind of leads us into the next conversation. Before I talk about what are the challenges within ERP, let me make a couple of really key statements that are important to internalize here. First and foremost, ServiceNow is not a system of record. ServiceNow does not seek to replace the core or to own the data that lives within those ERP systems. There are two key categories of users that access or use and operate within an ERP system. Category one are the power users. These are the people that operate every day within SAP. These are the people that SAP and Oracle were built for. It's the second category, the temporary users, the people that log in once a week, once a month, a couple times a quarter, a couple times a year. They're the ones that need a better experience. They're the ones that are also requesting password reset, network access, help for a laptop, adding their son or daughter to their benefits. Those are the people that we can provide a better experience for. And I think it's really important for us to recognize who we are and what we do, and to make sure we're drawing a line in the sand and we're not encroaching in areas where we are not served as an organization to serve you as a valued customer. So let's switch gears real quick and go a little bit deeper into transformation challenges around ERP. First and foremost, these systems are cumbersome and difficult to innovate. They require really highly specialized skill sets. Those skill sets are lowly available and they're high in demand. That means you outsource. So the ability to deliver innovation happens over months, sometimes years. And when it's difficult to innovate, it's hard to find resources and you have to outsource. People are going to find other ways of working. Those other ways of working may be phone calls, they could be shared email inboxes, or they could be spreadsheets. And all of those things have to be documented. They have to be emailed around, or they have to be manually updated and uploaded into that system of record so that you can have a single source of truth. But that latent process in its own right introduces doubt with regards to the sanctity of the data living within that system and its reliability. And it creates operational debt that it gets stacked on the shoulders of people who are just trying to work and spend less time getting work done. The final piece of this is poor user experiences. If I have to navigate 20 or 30 homegrown systems along with 3 or 4 different massive beasts that are difficult to engage with, they all have different user experiences, and I have to log in and access them at different times. For me, the end user, I have a different expectation. I'm being hit every day with this massive discrepancy between the service I get from the enterprise and the experiences I consume in my daily life. The opportunity here is to merge digital experiences we consume every day through our cell phone, through modern web-based engagement, and merge that with the expectation we have from these big legacy systems that our organization depends on. So how do we thread the needle in that? And what's the picture to paint? ServiceNow is a lot like Apple in that Apple gives you the operating system, they give you the device, but what they don't do is build your productivity applications. They open this up to a third-party ecosystem and organizations from all over the world. In order to get access to the consumers and users of Apple products, they have to meet certain standards on their applications, whether it's usability, performance, functionality. Users inherently, when they download an application from the App Store, they know how to get it, they know how to use it. They don't need to be trained because those applications meet those standards. So that when I go and download a social media application, a news application, a fantasy sports application, or a personal finance application, I can become an immediate consumer, and immediate consumption and ease of use becomes baked in to my daily life. It becomes a habit, it becomes a pattern. And those organizations, they monetize my data. They make sense of my data so they can provide better experiences and they can drive more use. That's where the opportunity is for the enterprise. If it's easy to use and everybody likes it and knows how to use it, then organizations will be successful in delivering technology at a higher rate. That higher rate of delivery of technology will reach new altitude with regards to consumption. So success will be appropriately defined and recognized.
Gus, I just want to jump in for a second. I think when there's a consistency to the way people do work in systems, productivity increases. Because in your example, if I'm, in an HR system to do something relative to beneficiaries for my healthcare plan, or I'm in the finance system trying to get approval to travel, or I'm in even a program system trying to do an aspect of my job. If the user interface is familiar, if how I navigate through that system is consistent, the organization has a real productivity benefit because I might be in the system only on occasion, or I might be in it every day, but I know it and I understand it. It's not some one-off where I have to remember, how do I submit a request? Where do I go? That consistency has a broad positive impact. And we see that in agencies where they've decided to standardize on ServiceNow for enterprise kinds of applications. Those applications have a consistent look and feel. There is an understanding about how to do things, and people in those systems are able to operate faster. We know this, right, from a variety of customers, and we see it, in our customers where they use capabilities around HR or they use our portal technologies to bring a variety of applications into one place. You can run through all those applications much faster, and customer satisfaction increases in addition to productivity.
Absolutely. All right, so here's what's happening. We're creating two really distinct categories in this space. The first category are systems that are designed for the control of data. I said earlier that if data is static, it cannot be valuable over the course of time. So in order for data to be valuable, it has to be accessible and it has to be dependable. That's really where ServiceNow is creating a second category of software relative to ERP. Remember, we don't want to own the core processes. We don't need to own all the data. We don't need the core users. The people that have to approve things, the people that have to fill out forms in order for that data to be relevant. Those are the people who are already spending time in ServiceNow. And all we're talking about is putting the right information in front of the right person so they can take an informed action in a dependable user experience. So this is where the real opportunity is to embrace ServiceNow as that agility layer, a unified system of engagement with work being processed and executed within ServiceNow, action being taken within one common layer, routing down into one system that holds that data. But remember, ServiceNow doesn't have to own it for it to be valuable within ServiceNow. And in a second, I'll talk about how we maintain that sanctity between the two systems. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in this space that allows you to own that single source of truth and separate it from that system of action. But there's one thing I will say here on this slide is we reference this abstraction as the agility layer. And over the years, everybody's talked about agility as the ability to do things really quickly. And like that point's not lost on us within ServiceNow. It's still very much part of the core value statement of the platform. But in my opinion, one of the things that's overlooked with regards to agility is the agility to make decisions based on the best interest of an organization. If data can live in the system that's best suited and it can be accessible to the system that's best suited for action, knowing full well that data and action are going through a massive paradigm shift relative to what's happening in the technological landscape today, separating these hazards and distributing that risk and picking the best tool for the job is an insurance policy for organizations. That means that as data changes over time, as systems change, as you're faced with gun to your head decision points about what to migrate to and when, you actually have flexibility here in your migration path because you can choose where data lives. And an example of this is something that we have customers and we have global partners that do this for their own internal business. Let's take the migration from ECC 6 over to S4 as the example. In that migration path, you have to standardize, reformat, move your data from ECC 6 over to S4. Users engage through ECC 6, and then we cut over, and they have to engage through S4. That cutover isn't just a flip of the switch. That cutover is education, it's enablement, it's ongoing change management, and it's also the abstraction of customization and the refitting and reformatting of that business process into the decision criteria of a core process or a customization within that system. The issue, though, is that you've basically picked an old problem up and put it onto a new problem with a highly performant in-memory database, but the users don't have anything different. And that's really what we're talking about, is embracing this new paradigm. And by embracing this new paradigm, we will embrace the architectural North Star that all the ERP vendors are promoting, which is a lean or a clean core architecture. What they're saying is take these customizations, take this messy middle, and fit it into the box of this core process. That will reduce the customization and the mess around that core, and will provide you with a more sustainable ERP for the future. What we're saying is end users and their business units can still have their custom business processes with standardization and governance all built in, but they can still be that snowflake. But that snowflake can exist, and we can maintain standardization on the data side of things within that core over on the ERP system. And in doing so, we will embrace a new version of a clean or a lean core architecture. The best tool for the job, that tool being consolidated with use cases and common use patterns across the enterprise for what ServiceNow is already being leveraged for, integrated intelligently into a managed, cleaner and leaner core on the SAP, the Oracle, or the Workday side. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, like, okay, that sounds like a lot. Like, what are the things that I should be thinking about here relative to what's a good fit for ServiceNow and what belongs in the ERP? Let me generalize this. Things that are long running, things that hop across multiple different departments and teams, things that are rich in approvals. These are things that belong in ServiceNow. The core processes, the analytics, and the reporting around that data, that belongs in and next to the data itself over on the ERP side of things. A great example of this is master data. Master data management relative to, let's take suppliers and vendor management as an example. I have customers that they have a memorialized example of master data in that ERP system. But every week or every month, there are spreadsheets that get emailed around to every key business unit, stakeholder, and data analyst where they have to peel through that data. They have to look at the processes around that, and they have to put their stamp of approval on that master data so that it can then be reconciled against the master data image over here in that ERP system. That's where the opportunity is for ServiceNow, is if we can expose master data to ServiceNow, and we can identify the footprints and the metadata, then we can route approvals or memorialize that data in a digital way, remove spreadsheets, remove emails and shared email inboxes, drastically shorten the time it takes to execute on that business process, and guarantee we have a clean source of truth over on the ERP side of things, while guaranteeing that we can report across that data and be able to show and prove to our board members, to our executives, and to our key stakeholders that the data we have that's informing the business decisions that we're making is real and it's real time.
So, Gus, I just want to jump in for a second because I think this is such an important slide. When I was a CIO, some of the biggest challenges I faced were people who wanted to use a system or a technology because they liked it, not because it was the best fit for the requirements at hand. And I would always encourage people to let's slow down. Slowing down, I think, in some of these situations really becomes a superpower because it gives you the chance to, really reflect on what you're trying to accomplish and how the options for implementing requirements are, best fit for one system or the other. And I think about ServiceNow. ServiceNow is built for delivering services. It's a service delivery capability at its core. So, when we're talking about getting something completed through a process or a workflow, we're trying to get something to somebody. We're trying to get them a result. That's ServiceNow. And ERPs have tremendous capabilities that are different from that, managing, the complex master data as Gus alluded to, or complex financial transactions that work in a very predefined way. And, just understanding what a particular system is built to do at its core, what it's best fit for, and having some structure around the decision making is a best practice beyond this slide, out to all the other technologies you might have in your organization. But it's, I think, really important right here. And the last thing I would note is, in my experience, we could pretty much accomplish anything in any technology if we customized it enough, if we worked hard enough to make those requirements fit. We could always do it, but it was never necessarily the right or a good long-term solution because the complexity of getting something built translates to the complexity in cost for managing and maintaining it over time. And when you don't customize, when you focus on configuration, you focus on best fit like I'm describing, those costs routinely are lower. And lower cost of operation create more opportunity for innovation. So we have to be mindful of these things as we're making our technology choices. And those technology choices have real resonance in the organization because a bad choice creates technical debt, and that technical debt is eating us alive. It continues to. So we cannot add to it as we're making strategic investments in technologies like ServiceNow or SAP or choose your tool. Let's make the right choices. And what Gus is showing on the slide, I think, are really key takeaways for everybody as they're thinking about these kinds of decisions an organization has to make.
Absolutely. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about our approach and how we get started. So the first thing is you're going to be faced with a decision. Change the business process to fit the core process available in the ERP or customize the ERP. Yes, SAP has made drastic improvements in their tools and in their interface, but it hasn't really changed much with regards to the benefit back to the organization. So if we can identify the gaps of where customization needs to take place or where it's the right fit for multi-step automation, then we can decide at that point that ServiceNow can be an option for us. Now, we talked about it a little while ago about the speed of innovation, the availability and the dependability of skill sets that are typically outsourced. But the important note here is the juxtaposition that carries against ServiceNow. Why is it different? I talked about it earlier. Everything that ServiceNow sells is built with the same set of tools that ServiceNow espouses that our customers use to extend our products. Our products don't just work together side by side. They're natively hooked into each other. They are part of each other. They sit atop and scale linearly with that integrated single layer for data and single way in which we model. So if ServiceNow can lower the barrier of development so that non-typical developers can at least have input and can collaborate on development in a governed way, and if ServiceNow has a greater pool of accessible developer resources for the hard things, then I can deliver these customizations with governance and security while protecting the sanctity of data. And I can do so in a more rapid and in a more convenient, but also a more secure and comfortable way for the organization. I can drive down my cost of innovation. I can drive down my cost of change management. I can retain my intellectual property and not outsource everything. I can do that with ServiceNow, and I can do something different and expect a different result. So when we find that gap and we decide that ServiceNow is a fit, you have another decision tree to navigate. A second ago, I said that everything ServiceNow builds and supports is done so with the same set of tools that we evangelize our customers use to extend our products or to build things where there is no product that exists. The reason I say it like that is because I want you to think about our products as accelerators. These are not things that fit a form factor. There is no software company on the planet Earth that knows your business requirements better than you know yourself. No one should tell you what belongs where, and no one should tell you, how it needs to look, and no one should tell you that you need to change your business process. You can take ownership and control of how your processes look if you take ownership and control of how your architecture is established. And within that architecture and within that decision tree, you have a choice on, does ServiceNow offer me something, a module, if you will, that gets me 60 to 70% of the way there, and it's cost effective and in the best interest of my organization to use these developer tools to extend that product. That will deliver outcomes more rapidly it will reduce my risk, and it will allow me to show transformation back to the organization funding a migration project around ERP and transform user experience without having to complete data migration first. Meaning, if we establish the right architecture with ServiceNow and the right connection points with our ERP system, I can connect ServiceNow into ECC while I'm migrating over to S4. I can cut over from ECC over to S4, and my end users don't have to know any different. We have a customer that does this today because they're migrating from PeopleSoft over to Workday, but Workday was going to take 5 or 6 years, and they absolutely needed to modernize PeopleSoft in the interim. So they decided to put ServiceNow, our omni-channel enterprise engagement model through EC Pro, along with HR-related workflows through HRSD in front of PeopleSoft. And then as they begin to migrate over to Workday, they will extend that engagement layer and those workflows over on top of Workday, and they will change the integration path, but they will not need to train users and go through massive change management exercises as they take advantage of that architectural agility and that decision-making agility. That will allow them to accomplish systematic migrations. It will allow them to show transformation back to the business. And it allows executives and system integrators to hang their hat on something that's accomplished without having to wait many years before they have something to show. So let's talk really quickly about how this happens, because integrations just simply are not enough in order to be successful here. If you have data that's not changing super rapidly within the ERP system, then typical integration paths are more than enough. But when you're accessing something within the ERP system where that ERP data is changing rapidly, you have to not just think about a connection point, you have to think about disparate objects across that ERP system. So hypothetically, let's say that we create a workflow that needs to pull master data, or not master data, rather data from objects across multiple disparate entities or object points within that ERP system. In that scenario, APIs aren't enough. Why? Because every time I need to connect to a different object, I have to build a different integration point. And that data is changing so fast that the change rate is happening quicker than the replication or the persistence level is happening between those systems. So ServiceNow said, hey, we got to have a different way of solving this problem. So on the top of the screen here, you have this thing that's called Data Hub. Data Hub is the ability to model multiple disparate objects from the ERP system into ServiceNow to establish a single connection point between those two systems and to mirror or persist data from that system where change is happening into ServiceNow so that users are accessing data that is a source of truth. It is a real-time or near-time representation, depending on the use case, of that data as it exists. So think about it this way. A user who sits in facilities has the same view as a user who sits in finance, as a user who sits in IT. They go to their omni-channel experience and they see that they have to execute on a task, or they search for a catalog item because they need to make a procurement request. They make that request, they're prompted to fill things out, they fill out their form, they hit submit. Upon submission, it's routed to a fulfiller, someone who can do something on behalf of that person who needs something. That person goes through their playbook, and that business process executes. In order for ServiceNow to be taken seriously as a workflow platform, we have to move outside of our own four walls. We can't just operate inside the four walls of ServiceNow, because if we do that, then we're just like everybody else. So that business request requires us to extract or to put down data across multiple different objects on the ERP side. Data Hub is what allows us to model those objects. It's what allows us to represent real time how that data is, so that the change rate is presented in the engagement layer so that people are engaging with data in a single state, and that enrichment happens on both sides of this equation. That's how we're going to maintain a single source of truth while bringing forward the organization and the expectations users have with regard to experience. That's how we'll drive up the adoption of new technology, show value back to the business while maintaining the sanctity of that data. So what we've tried to establish up until this point is there is a new architectural paradigm that you can embrace and adapt. And in doing so, you will push the organization forward. In doing so, you will protect your efficiency requirements, maintain your fiscal standards, and you'll be able to give users what they need when they need it without having to go through all the friction of change between different systems. Because remember, you may go from ECC over to S4, but all of that change amounts to the same principles of user experience. I got to go from one system to the other system. I got to operate in spreadsheets or emails. I got to upload. I have to manually enter. And I have to know where to go and when to go and why to go in order to successfully execute on that task. There's a new paradigm and there's a new opportunity in how we can embrace this world, which will allow you to actually move the organization forward. The reason we've established and we've set the conversation up this way is because this sets the standard for how you will then embrace AI, generative or agentic, in the future. ServiceNow makes the statement that AI is only as valuable as the platform that it's built on. And that's absolutely true. But in order for AI to be relevant, processes have to be present. In order for processes to be present in ServiceNow, they have to have access to the data. So we've tried to set up the equation that in order to embrace agentic, in order to embrace generative AI, for all the promises that it brings, ServiceNow needs to be the baseline. And by the way, that baseline, we already have feature and functional parity between our generally available clouds and our protected environments, which means customers who want to embrace agentic while changing their ERP paradigm can do so with ServiceNow without being held back by the limitations of vendors in the ERP space. So Jonathan, I'm going to turn it over to you and allow you to talk for a few minutes about how we're positioning ourselves within the world of AI and how ServiceNow can be relevant here.
Thanks, Gus. So, I think one of the important takeaways that we've talked about this already, but an important takeaway is the idea that ServiceNow as a platform that is ubiquitous across government has the ability to be this centerpiece inside any agency where things get connected into it, where users go to transact business, where the system of action across many different kinds of transactions that people have to do as part of their job. When we take that view of the world, and then we think about how does AI make ServiceNow or make those actions better, we can see that the ability to incorporate data from across the enterprise, we can see that the workflows that have existed for a long time in ServiceNow can be accelerated using artificial intelligence, using both the AI that we've built into ServiceNow, AI agents that can take the work that we're describing and beyond automation, use generative AI technology in the form of AI agents to make decisions or make recommendations and drive outcomes. And in a lot of agencies, there are going to be far fewer federal employees than we've had in the past. And I think that the future is a combination of workers, human workers, and digital workers. And that combination is going to be one way in which the federal government continues to provide service to people across the United States with far fewer people at lower costs. But the reality is that sort of change and transition is one that we're going to have to work on together, and we're going to have to be really thoughtful about. We know that government systems have been very siloed over a long period of time. They've been built by individual programs, or they've been built in different offices, and they've been built for very specific purposes. But to do what we're talking about, to really transform the way the work gets done, that data has to come together. I sound like a broken record on this, but we talk about this concept of AI plus data plus workflows is a very powerful combination to drive cost cutting and effective and efficient mission delivery in agencies. And data sits right in the middle of that equation. And I think that's so important because the data is necessary for the AI. The data is necessary for the workflows. So when we think about ServiceNow as an AI platform for transforming government, the things that really stand out to me when we say that is the core capabilities that are built into the platform to drive those connections and to drive those data elements onto the platform so the agents and other AI capabilities in ServiceNow can act on that data. So if I, I'm going to move to the next slide. So Gus, if you can advance for me, I think this is an important framing of the ServiceNow platform, right? So we've had a variety of versions of these kinds of slides over time, or this kind of diagram over time. What always stands out for me, and I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, but I just think it's so important based on my experience as a CIO and the recognition that we have data all over the organization. And unless we can harness that data, it's very difficult to drive the real transformation that we're talking about, is the bottom of this slide, that any system can connect into ServiceNow. The data from those systems, the core data that the agency or any organization uses to operate is available, can be made available on the platform. And irrespective of where ServiceNow is running, whether we're running in ServiceNow's government community cloud that operates at a FedRAMP high level, or you were in partnership with Microsoft and using our Impact Level 5 environment, or you're running in a Google or AWS environment, doesn't matter. We have the ability to connect those systems of record onto the platform where once that data is resident and through our workflow data fabric, which allows the connection, really supports those connections, and in partnership with Snowflake and Databricks, we can do it in a zero copy way, meaning we don't even have to bring that data onto the platform and store it and make another copy of it. We have too many copies of data so often. We bring that data on the platform and we have our agents and other AI capabilities be able to use that data to help drive decisions, to drive recommendations. We supercharge those workflows. Those are the workflows that we've been focused on for such a long period of time. Things that are very, critical at this moment, those workflows might be around IT asset management, or it might be around some employee workflows related to the return to work or other changes in the way agencies are interacting with their employees, and of course customer workflows. And think about it as customer relationship management. Our approach to CRM and a government approach to CRM is about interacting with constituents. It's about making sure that one government agency that serves another government agency can do it in a very professional and seamless way. So the agencies work together across the federal government and across state and local governments, the federal government. Those combinations, when they work, we can trade data and we can provide services that makes the government just work better. And we can, at ServiceNow, build on top of the platform, on top of the AI, the data, and the workflows, solutions specific to the kinds of things government does. It might be healthcare focused. It might be financial services focused. It could be manufacturing. It could be retail. It's any number of industries. We like to think about government as an industry of industries. Everything that's represented in the commercial world has some representation in government. And when we think about ServiceNow as this comprehensive platform, AI platform for government transformation across any industry, across any system, across any infrastructure, we have the ability to take the promise of AI and bring it to fruition very quickly, and to do it in a way that provides real value to the people that we serve. And too often, we've made these investments in technologies with great promise, but we haven't delivered on the value. I believe that when we're using a platform like ServiceNow and we're building on something that already exists in an agency and people know and understand and rely on, the chances of having a failed technology project, the chances of having a AI investment that doesn't produce results, those things go way down because we're using the AI that's already built into ServiceNow to drive greater value of that ServiceNow investment. So Gus, if you can go to the next slide. the idea that we're this platform for transformation from across all these different areas, as I was mentioning, finance, as Gus has talked about today, or the more sort of traditional areas that ServiceNow has been in IT, in risk and security, if we're dealing with employees or we're dealing with the public, the opportunity to get value from the AI is huge. And I think about it in a few ways. So I think the first thing I always sort of go to is this idea that we have to make operations seamless in agencies. The harder it is for an agency to operate, and this is based on experience as a CIO and a federal employee for more than a decade, the harder it is for us to operate internally, the harder it is for us to serve the public effectively. And we can't serve the public effectively. We end up in this situation where people don't trust the agency to be able to deliver on its mission. People don't trust government. We have low trust in government and institutions overall. So we have the ability, using these kinds of capabilities, to change the way we operate and be more effective and provide better service to people. And that lets us adapt and change quickly. When we have a platform like this, we don't need months and years to deliver on technology. We can go live in record time if we understand our requirements, if we work with a mentality of not customizing but configuring. We can go live very fast. We can drive down the cost of our operations in IT and across the agency. We have less money in government than in the past. We know this. So we need solutions like ServiceNow to drive cost out, to make the operations less complex so we can go faster. And I'll say it one last time, when we're operating in an environment like ServiceNow that's trusted and understood, the AI technology is there to make ServiceNow work better, to work faster, to integrate AI models outside of ServiceNow so we can make the intelligence that they generate actionable. There's there's little value in having great intelligence or knowing something if you can't do something with that. So we can connect to any other AI model that you might be using and take the intelligence that it generates and make it actionable on the ServiceNow platform. And that is the thing that drives better operations, that drives better customer service, that drives the lower cost because we can just move faster and provide better results more quickly. So, the promise of ServiceNow, I think, is never been more prevalent and important to government than in this age of AI. And we've been investing in AI for quite a long time. This is not a new thing. We're not just using the term. We have built a tremendous AI platform that's already serving value internally to ServiceNow because we use ServiceNow to run ServiceNow. We've built a lot of agents. We've demonstrated a lot of internal value in the work that we've done internally to make ServiceNow work better. We're applying these capabilities already in a number of agencies, and I just expect to see more and more government customers embrace this technology in the coming months. Gus?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate those thoughts. So look, let's do this because we got 5 minutes left. I want to answer a couple of questions. Let's jump to summary and closing. So right now, what I'm going to kind of summarize for you is what we talked about and what the returns and what the benefits are. And then we're going to answer some of the questions that are out there. So what's the business benefit? Look, your organization needs to operate at a different level. In order to operate at a different level, you need to improve the inputs so you can provide better outputs. That happens with employee experience. People know where to go and when to go, then they will get something done, and that something will enrich the data, and that data can be used to make better decisions on behalf of the government. The last tile over here on the left-hand side is app rationalization. And I want to talk about this for a quick second because it actually goes to one of the questions that's sitting out there. ERP systems were bought for the right reasons, but in order for the data to become valuable, people needed to engage with that data. So we built on top of that system. That's what created the complexity and the knot that needs to now be unwound within these ERP systems. I know that I'm oversimplifying it, and don't take what I'm about to say as like the literal meaning of this. It's a generalization. ERP systems are just really big monolithic applications. The same monolithic, not the same, but common monolithic patterns to the same technical debt we've stacked up across other systems and other data layers. So when we talk about application rationalization, we're talking about picking the best tool for the job. We're talking about providing a better experience and being able to get better operational returns and choose where things live and why. It's very similar to back in like 2017 or 2015 when everybody lifted and shifted legacy monoliths into the public cloud only to realize they're not operationalized to run efficiently or cost effectively in the public cloud. So what did we do? We started to decompose the monolith, strangle it out, and rebuild it and modernize it. And everything was a container, and everything was done on Kubernetes, and everything was done in the cloud, only to then realize that not everything needed to be a microservice, not everything needed to be thought about as needing to exist in a container. And we started to find that balance. The pendulum swung back into the middle. We're espousing and claiming that the exact same thing can happen and will happen in the ERP space. And what we're going to enable you to do is to then capture the value of agentic within the platform of ServiceNow. And the platform of ServiceNow is the workspace is the workplace. This is where productivity happens. And if people are productive, an agentic and generative can be a derivative of that platform, then we are exponentially closer to realizing the efficiency gains and the productivity gains that agentic promises. And that will deliver a more modern enterprise, which ultimately is going to enable the government to drive a leaner and cleaner modernization that picks the best tool for the job while empowering its users and empowering its employees and merging internal and external operations, consolidating layers of reporting, consolidating that messy middle or that human middleware, which will accelerate your ability to innovate the mission. And the mission of government is why we all care about government. The value is real. The mission is real. But the value of the mission and the returns of what we have done over the years has gotten lost, not just in the politics of it all, but in the systems and in the reporting of our ability to prove that what we're doing is valuable. And that's where the opportunity is. It's to streamline, it's to standardize, it's to embrace a new architecture. And by no means am I saying that ServiceNow is the end-all be-all for everything relative to finance or everything relative to an ERP system. I'm saying it's an option. It's an option that up until this point you have not been presented with. And that's where the opportunity is. So I'm going to do rapid fire with some of these questions really quickly. We'll go in reverse order. The first one is, am I suggesting ServiceNow can be leveraged as a front end to ERP systems and connect directly into SAP or other legacy systems? That is exactly what I'm suggesting. I'm more than suggesting it. I'm proclaiming that is what our customers are beginning to use it for. The next question is, if a customer has customized their ERP like SAP, they'll likely do the same thing, even if they switch to ServiceNow. And unless they change the processes and compromise to adopt out of box, they'll have a major cultural change. And this person says they don't see that happening in their department. What I think is that in order to go from something that's highly customized and then to embrace what somebody else has authored is the standard for your process, because that's what you have to do when you go from ECC to S4. You have to decompose that customization and fit it into the out-of-box process. You're going to go through that cultural change anyway. That cultural friction between the people that are building the system and the people that need to use the system. The people that need to use it say, this isn't built the way I need it, I'm not going to use it, and that's where friction happens. What we're saying is, the people that use the system need things that's their way, and the people that are building the system need something that's cleaner so it's more sustainable. Doing everything in the scope of one system isn't going to achieve nirvana. The way we get closer to nirvana is separating those hazards and distributing our risk and allowing the industry-leading workflow platform that puts the right information in front of the right person, that's configurable out of box and governed with roles in mind. That's the right way to be productive. And the right way to store your data, to report on your data, and to protect your data is to connect productivity into that system of record. And finally, the last question is, One platform concept is good, but I prefer best of breed tools and would like to prevent from a single point of failure. What's the opinion? That's exactly what we're saying. ServiceNow is the best of breed solution around workflow. ServiceNow provides optionality, back to what Jonathan was talking about earlier on AI, data, and workflows, but more importantly, relative to tooling. ServiceNow works with every major vendor that enterprises engage with. ServiceNow embraces all of the common APIs and connection protocols that every vendor leverages and works with. You have optionality and you have choice. But more than anything, the vendors, ServiceNow, SAP, Oracle, Palantir, we're all conceding that there is data that is going to exist in the middle. And we're all forming partnerships with Databricks and Snowflake. The one thing that I know is what ServiceNow does really well is we provide action. We're not this rich system to visualize data across all these different silos. Palantir does that. They do it really, really well. But we act on those results. We act on the decisions that are inferred or arrived at through the visualization provided by another system and another platform. And guess what? They're putting Palantir on top of Databricks and Snowflake. And Databricks and Snowflake are entering into agreements to share data, leveraging zero copy with SAP and Oracle. And ServiceNow is doing the exact same thing. The best tool for the job is the best tool for the job, and ServiceNow is the best option to provide informed action and informed insight. So I want to thank everybody for the time, allowing us to go a few.
Gus, I have one last thing I want to say.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Very well put. I think having been on these kinds of projects, it's sometimes very hard to know where to get started. And, my recommendation and how to get started is think about what your data is and think about what the work is. How does the work flow through the organization today? These are the things that, are maybe represented in SAP today, maybe elsewhere, but they relate. And then think about how they should work as you modernize. Just because it's a certain way today does not mean that's how it should be, especially as we're thinking about how we get value from artificial intelligence and AI agents, the investments that we've already made. And, as you think about what it is and what it should be, that doesn't require making an investment in a technology necessarily. That means spending the time to understand your environment. And then thirdly, you will make an investment, ideally in ServiceNow. And after you make that investment, you want to be able to demonstrate that it was a good investment, that it created value. We do that internally. That is one of our internal best practices. Everybody needs to think about how these processes work today and know how you're going to measure them as you modernize, as you introduce AI agents, as you introduce other technologies. So you can tell the story about how technology has transformed the organization. When you're able to tell that story, in my experience, you get a lot of people to listen when you're successful. And then you get a lot of opportunity to do more projects and more transformation opportunities. So think about what it is, think about what it should be, and how do you tell the story of your success are, I think, important things as you're getting started on these on this journey, or you're continuing the journey as you are in many cases. So thanks, Gus.
Yes, sir. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. Thank you for sticking with us. If you need anything or if you want to talk more deeply about this, reach out to your ServiceNow account manager. Tell them you want to talk about ERP. They'll know exactly who to go to, and they'll pull us together to have a more detailed conversation. So I just want to take some time to say thank you, and I hope that everybody has a great day. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of our participants as well as our speakers for being with us today. We hope the information you received during this webinar has been helpful. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to reach out. Thank you again and have a great day.